I want to greet Africans with a sense of joy and a sense of hope and say Africa from 2020 will never be the same. Africa is rising in 2020, and the next decade will be the decade of Africa. Africa will rise at a pace that is faster and more rapid than China, at a rate that is spread across the continent, all the nations rising together. Within 30 years, every African nation will be a first world nation. We have every resource, and we have this very simplest tool that we need to achieve that. It's called, number one, an idea. Number two, it's a vision. Number three, it's a leading idea into the future. Number four, it's a concept of intent. Number five, it's a bridge. Adequate means the value system, the behavior containing the behavior of the leadership to be a fit for that vision. And enough adequate capital. They say Africa has got a shortfall of $100 billion per year. So if you're going to develop Africa, transform Africa, you have to think at higher levels. The means has been conceptualized. The means to contain the errant politicians has been conceptualized, and the strategy has been conceptualized. On the 1st of July, 2020, the youth are going to have this plan in their hands, and they're going to press the reset button to drive Africa into this future. We have the confidence to pass on this legacy of a great future for Africa, of a leading Africa, of a powerful Africa. In 50 years, Africa becoming the leading economy by GDP in the world, with a massive 3 billion market, which no country can contest. That is the equity, that is the state that you have. In numbers, they say China in 40 years is going to be 58 trillion in GDP with 1 billion people. Do the math. Africa with 3 billion people. To be conservative, so I don't crash and crack your mind, Africa is going to be at least 50 billion in 50 years. I know the figure. It will blow your mind. But it's possible, it's doable, it's very easy. All you need to do is to have a vision and to have a bridge, which is the means, which is the behavior model, the ethical code, and a strategy. That's how all the other nations have done it. There's nothing complicated. There's nothing special about China. They have been helped by the Americans, just like the Japanese were helped by the Americans. I want you to be confident that before July, 1st July, you're going to have a plan in your hands that is complete and adequate for you to run the fast-track, rapid, transformational modernization of Africa with a power and rate that has never been matched before. That is concluded and done. Now, the next thing is I want to introduce to you a very radical idea. Very, very radical. It's very crazy. But it's not as crazy as Elon Musk when you think about it. Or President Kennedy many years ago when he said we're going to land a man on the moon. And now Elon Musk wants to land a man on Mars. So what I'm going to introduce to you is not crazy. In fact, that's how it has happened every nation. In order for the future of Africa to be realized, Africa must be predictable, it must be credible. It must be seen as a project, as a business project, with an honor. And to that extent, I want to believe that as the architect of the rapid transformation of Africa, I'm going to be the conceptual president of Africa in 5 years. What does that mean? We won't have a president, just a concept of it. Because why? I'll tell you in a minute. That way, we can now attract capital. It's as simple as that. It must be owned. It must be packaged. That's what the financial people are looking for. They want someone who'll be there to the long haul. I'm going to live to be 100 years. So I'm right there to our partners. There's the ownership. Now, under this plan, Africa is going to transform in 5 years to be African states. The same governments, but just the name, to get them used to working together. And by 1 year, from the 1st of July, they would have conceptualized and agreed to unite industrially, to unite so that we can launch the rapid modernization of Africa. And like I said, in the 5 years, we'll have united industrially, and we've done some foundation and infrastructure and administrative work for it to run. In the next 5 years, in 10 years, by 2030, Africa will unite politically. The Rapid Modernization Plan of Africa, under what I call the Rapid Africa Plan, is the economic vision or the economic part or the means to achieve Agenda 2063. Now, I want you to understand that there's nothing as far as the macroeconomic plan at the African Union, and there's no leadership as far as the fast-track modernization of Africa is concerned. They don't have it. And there have been all these leaderships, including the South African president, have been captured by China. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is the idea that China, unlike its philosophies, one Deng Xiaoping, the architect of Chinese modernization, said, he was talking to Nyerere, I think he said, colonialism, neocolonialism, and hegemony have become the problem, and it has become more difficult for poor countries to operate and to function. And he said China has a policy of not interfering with internal affairs of other nations. And he was complaining about America and said they infringe upon the sovereignty of poor and weak countries of the third world. Now, there's this issue that China is trying to bully. And he also said big nations should stop bullying small nations or weaker nations. There's this issue that is taking place in Eswatini. They're trying to bully the king and say, we'll take away your economic power, we'll take away your financial support. That is interference with internal affairs. Africa, we don't go east, we don't go west, we just go forward. We're neutral. The king, you have the right to relate with any country that you want. We are not part of China. We have our own way. And we're going to begin to build Africa to become a leading power in the world. Now, President Xi Jinping, the model that you've adopted for running Africa is going to implode. There's two things that you never do is to go against your original philosophies. Number two, you don't second guess yourself. Number three, you got to operate with integrity. And number four, without greed as a mission. And I think that summarizes your nation. Then I want to say to President Donald Trump, President Donald Trump, I'd like you to refer to the meeting that President Nixon had with the Chinese and the agreement they had in the Chinese. And I want you to look at the agreement they had with President Carter, that no nation will enter into any other nation for hegemony. I want to say to President Xi Jinping, again, from president to president, there's a new Africa rising. There's a new way in Africa. There's a new strategy in Africa. The old system is going to be disrupted. It will fall off. And you're going to be left with a vacuum. The sooner you realign yourself, re-engineer yourself to a new philosophy, the more we can accept you and adopt any semblance of any help. Africa is going to tap from its own capital, like you did, from the free market system, with an initial seed of billions and billions of dollars. We have incredible equity with the West where we can tap from, apart from the 300 years of industrialization. I would rather partner with the Western nations first. The African nations have been made to believe that there's a boogeyman that is ready to attack African nations. This is all China's plan. Any help that you have done on Africa, that you said to the king of Eswatini, go to Zambia, Mozambique, it's all your plan of building the Beltline and the Silk Road. We're actually, with our loans, building and driving your plan when our governments cannot pay because we don't have industry. I want to say this. As the conceptual president in 5 years, for me and my mind and the science of visionary propagation, when you have a vision, it's as if it's done and finished and it's in the past. Stan Davis called it a future perfect tense. I want to say the same thing that you said to President Obama. When in 2013, your first visit to America, you said, President Obama, don't mess with me and I'll not mess with you. And I want to say to you, as we drive the fast-track rapid modernization of Africa, from president to president, from chemical engineer to chemical engineer, don't mess with me, don't mess with Africa, don't mess with Eswatini. The king of Eswatini, I can have a team in your country, under my company, Stravina Strategic Vision Engineers of New Africa, and help you design a transformational plan that will raise your nation from third world to first world within 10 to 15 years. For a small country, I would say 10 years. Oh, my battery is kind of expired here. Within 10 years, with adequate capital that's not coming from China. You don't have to be instructed by China who to align with. This is the rise of Africa. This is the total revolution of Africa. This is the seed of the explosive expansion, the explosive, massive rejuvenation of Africa into the leading economy in 50 years.